Hi everybody, this is Mr. Zoeller, and today I'm going to be presenting you a screencast on Road to the Revolution, taxes. For the objective for this video, you should be able to illustrate the different means by which the British government tried to raise money to pay for the protection of the colonies. So first, let's look at two different groups of colonists that are in the 13 colonies that we'll kind of generalize. One group that we're going to have is called the Loyalists. And so the Loyalists are going to be colonists that are loyal to Great Britain. That's where the name Loyalist comes from. And they believe that colonists do not have the right to separate from Great Britain, and they see the other group, which are called Patriots, as rebels committing treason. For the Patriots, they believe that the colonies should stand up to Britain, since the colonies have no voice in the British Parliament. So you're going to hear the phrase in class a lot, no taxation without representation. So the Patriots believe that any taxes they pay must be they must give their consent to it. They must have been able to vote on it. And in the end, they're going to be the group arguing for separation from Great Britain, which is going to end up leading to treason and the American Revolution. So first, let's start with a big change between the Great Britain and the 13 colonies, and that's going to be what's called the 7 Years' War, or as in the United States we call it the French and Indian War. So this was a war between 1755 to 1763 that started in the Ohio River Valley, and it's going to be started by George Washington, and we'll learn more about it in class later. So in this war, it's going to be fought between the British and the French over land. So if you look at the name up there, the French and Indian War, and that is from the American point of view. That's who we're fighting. We're fighting France and their Indian allies. So for the two sides during this war, the British side is going to be the British Army, the colonists, and the Iroquois nation. And on the French side, it's going to be the French Army and the Algonquins and some other Native American tribes as well. So after 7 years of fighting, the British are going to end up winning this war, and they're going to gain a large part of Canada and lands west of the Appalachian Mountains. And because of this war and other wars that the British have been fighting for over 50 years now, they believe it's time to force the colonists to pay taxes to help pay off their debt, because they have this huge debt that they have to pay off after this war. And a lot of the wars were fought for the protection of the colonies, and so they believe it's time for the colonists to pay their fair share. So let's look at post-French and Indian War. So for the first time in 50 years, England is now at peace. They're not at war with anybody. They had this huge debt, though, that they had to pay off, since the war is very, very expensive for troops and manpower and shipping, the equipment, everything that goes into it. And so increasing the taxes in the colonies seems like it's justified. The wars fought to help protect the colonies. And the British felt that since they were protecting the colonies should pay. So one of the big things that's going to come up after the French and Indian War is the Proclamation of 1763. So you can see over here the 13 colonies, the British colonies, and now all of this land to the west over here is going to be British land. So what the Proclamation of 1763 said, it forbids settlers to advance beyond the Appalachian Mountains, which means that American colonists were not allowed to move west of this line, and this line runs down the Appalachian mountain range. And so that means that England is controlling where the colonists could go rather than each of the colonial governments. And so this was kind of a check on the colonial governments, which said that the British had more power and could tell the colonists where they could and could not live. Now, one of the reasons that the British are doing this is because they want to keep the peace between their colonies and Native American lands. They don't want to have another war that they have to worry about. And so for many of the Native American tribes to the west of the Appalachian Mountains, this is a nice thing for them, as that means their land's going to be protected and colonists aren't going to be allowed to live on it. But so the British point of view, they're trying to keep the peace. From the colonist point of view, however, they see this as an intrusion on their rights. Many colonists were hoping to gain more land, fighting with the British during the French and Indian War, and so now they're told that they're not allowed to expand further out to the west. So what's the result of the war? Well, or a result of this proclamation, I should say. Well, one thing is it's going to fail. And why is it going to fail? Well, one is because it's not going to stop the colonists from expanding. A lot of the land's already been taken in the east, and so many of them are going to keep heading to the west. And so you're going to have more and more settlers heading west. The British also weren't enforcing it. They didn't have very many troops. And so that's going to allow the colonists to continue to head out west and then running into different Native American tribes and we'll still have attacks and violence going on because of that. So this is the first time where the British are really stepping in and saying to the colonists, this is something you cannot do. Whereas beforehand and before the French and Indian War, Great Britain left the colonies alone to do their own thing, and the colonists made their own laws and made their own taxes, and so they see this as an intrusion by Great Britain on their rights. So the British fought and won the French and Indian War. So we're going to have fighting of Native Americans involved with that. And as I said, that's one of the reasons why we have that proclamation line for protection. The British have a huge war debt they need to pay off. And so in the end, they're going to need to start taxing the colonies. And so the taxes are passed by the British Parliament. So in 1764, the British Parliament is going to pass the Sugar Act. And remember, the British Parliament is the elected group of representatives for the English Empire in London. And the 13 colonies, however, have no representatives that are voting on their behalf. They don't have any representatives at all in the Parliament. And so this tax put tax on import of sugars to the colonies. And so to enforce this act, the British are going to begin to stop and search American ships.
Up until 1764, Britain hadn't interfered much with the way her colonies were run. The government had maintained an informal policy of healthy neglect. As a result, the colonies were somewhat independent and weren't used to being told what to do. But the British government had gone deeply in debt fighting France, and it desperately needed money. So it was decided that the colonies had to help pay for their own defense. To raise this money, Parliament made a new law called the Sugar Act. It required payment of a tariff on imported items such as molasses, sugar, wine, and coffee. Tariffs were supposed to be used to regulate trade. However, some Americans realized that the tariffs imposed by the Sugar Act were just a thinly disguised way of getting them to pay new taxes. The tariffs upset a lot of people because the colonies were not allowed to have representatives in Parliament to stand up for their rights. The most outspoken person on the subject was Samuel Adams of Boston, who declared that the Sugar Act was illegal because the right of taxation was a power that should belong only to the people or their elected representatives.
They know they have the power to hit England where it hurts. They will boycott British goods. George Washington.
Block English goods. Starve their trade and manufacturing. Yes, the more I think about this plan, the more ardently I wish its success. Gentlemen in their several counties should explain matters to the people and urge them to adhere to the non-importation agreement.
For the boycott to be effective, the entire population will have to be mobilized. But up to now, the leaders have not involved the common people in the workings of government. Indeed, they think that ordinary people have no capacity for political thought. Gentlemen lead. Commoners know their place.
One of the hardest things, I think, for us to recapture of this distant, different world is the distinction between commoners and gentlemen, a kind of distinction that we find hard to understand because for us, almost all adult males are gentlemen. We put it on our restroom doors, the term, but these gentlemen saw themselves as separate from the rest of the populace.
18th century men, women, and children of every race, class, and region actually believed that hierarchy was the norm in nature and in society. Some people were better than other people. Some people were placed in circumstances that were better. Poor people were thought of as the poor. If you were wealthy, you were superior. That was how the world operated.
This world is beginning to change as common people take an active role in the protest movement. For many of the colonial elite, it seems to threaten the very stability of society.
There are these town meetings. which people of wealth and character do not even attend, because they are sure to be outvoted by men of the lowest order. So it is government by the mob. This has given the inferior people such a sense of their own importance that a gentleman does not get from them even common civility anymore.
As the boycott grows and shops once filled with British merchandise begin to empty, more and more people are choosing to make do without imported manufactured goods.
I have cut back on every superfluous expense. I haven't even bought a new cap or gown since last Christmas. I'm even learning how to knit, something I've never done before. Making stockings out of good New England wool, throwing my mite for the public support.